All right, what's happening, everybody? This is it. We made it to the end. We are finishing up with the classical period. Remember, classical period encompasses the Mauryan and Gupta dynasties in India, Qin and Han dynasties in China, Rome, Athens and Sparta, and the four Persian empires as well. So, with that being said, let's get these questions out of the way, and then we will be done with it all. So, first question. What were the important characteristics of the classical period's governments in terms of size, centralization, building projects, militaries, economics, taxes, etc., etc., etc.? All right, so first part here is the size. When we look at the size of these empires, the important thing to note is that they pretty much bump up against each other. Now, obviously, we have this gap here between Persia and China, and this is where those nomadic Indo-European horseback riding tough dudes carried goods back and forth across. But essentially, everybody butted up to each other, and there were very few spots, except for here, that trade wasn't secured. So the size of these, how much bigger they are than they were before, played a huge part that things got traded back and forth rather easily. All right? Now, the other thing to note is that help facilitate the exchange of goods and ideas. So we'll get back to that in a little bit, but it's going to be a big part of it. Next, the centralization issue. Remember, all of these governments, when you take a look at all of these governments, they were all highly centralized, except for the Gupta. But we'll get to that in a second. Han and Qin China, totally centralized. Persian empires, we know that they were the creators of being able to manage and centralize the authority so that one ruler could pretty much control everything, or at least there was one central government that was controlling all of the things that were occurring in those areas. All right? Remember that the Gupta dynasty that was able to get away with being decentralized was that the caste system was so organized and was so detailed in controlling people's lives that they didn't need to be centralized to maintain order in what was happening in the country there. So those were the important aspects of centralization, and as a result, you can now build, secure, all of these things that these empires needed to do when you just had one central government. Centralization allowed for order in all aspects of society. Economically, the governments all supported the economic. Socially, when you think about all of the religious customs, the patriarchal kind of ways, the social classes, all that kind of stuff, was all enforced by the government, just like we do in this country today. So whenever a government backs something, it seems to stick, right? And then the political and military order was also huge. And then finally, economics. The trade along the Silk Road brought in a ton of money to each of the societies involved. And as a result, this trade was the single most important aspect of the period, as it allowed for taxes on goods and people to be collected by governments, and thus allowing them to do all of these huge projects that we talked about. Like when you think about Roman architecture, these things don't get built without money. right? You don't build these types of amazing structures without money. You don't have the baths that we talked about, all that. Greece, with the Parthenon, you do not have this unless all that money was coming in. The Great Wall of China, right? This is beginning, and a chunk of it is being built during the Qin and Han dynasties to protect those borders. And this obviously takes a ton of money and manpower and that to do it. Remember the Persian Qanats, where they brought water through the desert and underground tunnels to places that in the middle of the desert could have agriculture, water for large populations and cities to occur. So again, important there. This would be like kind of a re-image of what the Parthenon was there in Greece, what it would have looked like back before. It kind of looks like this now. So, with that being said, let's move on. Wait a second, that's not the right one. All right. So all of this trade brought stability and security to tens of millions of people from living from Europe to China. And it really was true. Without that Silk Road, without that transcontinental trade, it wouldn't have worked. Question 2, what were the importance economic characteristics of the classical period in terms of trade, currency, jobs, wealth, and the spreading of disease and ideas? So as I noted in the last question, everything that the classical period civilizations were able to accomplish was a result of the Silk Road and Indian Ocean Basin trade routes. Without a doubt. Hands down, nothing gets done unless that stuff occurs, unless those trade routes occur. None of these civilizations could have created what they did without it. However, the ideas of human interaction along these trade routes were just as important. Religions, ideas, forms of government, all of that stuff spread with the people that carried these goods. All right, and as well as disease too. You will see that, like Han China, if you really get into history when you get into college, you'll take a couple courses on this stuff, and you will find out that Han China, Rome, Persia, all suffered devastating plagues where like 1 out of every 4 people died because of the disease spread along these trade routes. And when that happened, trade would kind of reduce for maybe 10 years or so, and then as the populations rebounded, they would get back into more and more trade. But it was definitely something that was a negative aspect of the Silk Roads. Social questions, important characteristics of the classical period in terms of patriarchy and social class. I think that the biggest thing to note here is social classes. You had your upper, middle, and lower classes, and then slaves. The 2 most important classes during this time period are the middle class, which any healthy society has a strong middle class. The more and more middle class people you have living in a society, the stronger it is. You will see this throughout all of history. All right, so as we move forward, you will see that the more people have a decent living, the better off and the healthier a society is. On the other hand, the other one was the slave population. And about 25% of all of these cultures were slaves. And a lot of it's because they conquered so many people as they grew to be so big that they used these slaves to improve their economy. All right, they were able to have cheap labor to keep the cost down for people to be able to afford goods that normally couldn't afford them in the past, and also that's just a lot of money coming in that people are able to spend on different things because they're not paying so much in labor. It doesn't necessarily mean good things for the poorer classes, but was good for the overall society. Patriarchy was a part of all classical period societies. We have the examples of Confucianism's flower piety in China, paterfamiliaris in Rome, Athens, women were not allowed to vote, Persia, the veiling of women, India was child marriage and sati. Remember, that was the practice of women throwing themselves on their husband's funeral pyre as an honorable thing. And then the only real exception during this time where women were afforded a great deal of respect in that was in Sparta. So, we move on, and we are almost done here. What were the main religions of the classical period? And China was going to adopt Buddhism as it comes in far after the Gupta Empire in India kicked it out. Remember, Buddhism and Jainism started in India as kind of like pushing back against the caste system. However, in the end, Hinduism will remain as the main religion of India. Rome is going to evolve from following Greece's polytheistic gods to converting to Christianity at the end. And then Persia experimented with some monotheistic religions, but it won't be until next unit that Islam is created and adopted widely in the Middle East. So, and then the last one, forget it. I think we covered all of that kind of stuff in the questions above. So, again, I can't thank you. The classical period is one of my favorite periods of all time. And I hope we did a decent job covering it with you. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to everybody in the next unit. Peace out.